Good afternoon. The current book I'm writing is called Judging Joe, about a young man who signs up to be in the Korean War. He's a conscientious objector, so he goes in and to be a medic. And I just want to share with you some of the things that I'm learning during my research about Korea, because I knew nothing about the Korean War except what I saw on MASH. And I needed to get into a little more depth of the war and why and where and what and all that sort of thing. So I just wanted to share with you a few things. As you probably know, the Korean War lasted from 1951 to 1953. However, only the first year of the war was actual battles. The last 2 years were what they called the peace talks, trying to come to some kind of an agreement. They knew that the North Koreans and South Koreans knew that they were at a stalemate and nobody was going to win the war. So they wanted to come to some kind of an agreement as to who would get what and so forth. So anyway, 2 years of that war were all trying to decide what to settle on. They started in Kaesong, North Korea, with the peace talks, and then they switched over to Panmunjom because they realized that Kaesong was in the communist area of the North Korea. And since a lot of the ambassadors to the peace talks were from the United Nations, they didn't want to have to go through um, communist North Korea to get to the peace talks. So then they moved them to Panmunjom. And what was amazing to me was that most of the peace talks were centered on what to do with the prisoners of war. And the South Koreans had captured a lot of the North Koreans and Chinese as prisoners of war. So when they decided they would just have them returned, it turns out that the prisoners did not want to go back to North Korea or China. They were happy staying where they were. Well, that didn't set well with North Korea. So most of that 2 years was taken up with them deciding what to do with the prisoners, since the prisoners didn't want to go back home. And that blows my mind to think of so much manpower was wasted on the prisoners that didn't want to go back home. They finally came to a conclusion, and um, let me see, I'll be right there with you. And in December of 1952, India came up with a solution, believe it or not, that they would sign the Korean War armistice. And it still took a while for the prisoners to go where they wanted to go. And then in March of 1953, Stalin died. And so since the new leaders of Russia did not want to get involved in the war anymore, and China and North Korea could not continue without the Soviet Union's aid, they decided to end the talks and to have peace. It's amazing what ended the war. It took Stalin dying. But another thing I've learned is that the Battle of Chosin, which was during the winter of 1951-52, that was in North Korea, the Chosin Reservoir. That was a brutal, brutal winter. It was like down to 40 below, and it's a very mountainous and hilly region. So the soldiers, whether from South Korea or United States or our allies, were fighting up in a very cold, very hilly area. And once the battle was over, they tried sending in ambulances to bring the injured back down to an aid station, but the ambulances couldn't manage that hilly terrain, and they were also trying to fight the weather elements, snow and oil freezing in the ambulance and whatnot. So it was a 70-mile trek from Chosin Reservoir down to an aid station in Ham Hung, and they made the soldiers walk. They said, if you could walk, then you will have to walk. And they ended up at the aid station where my character Joe was working, um, with frostbite, hypothermia, all kinds of horrible things. So this is just a little introduction of what you're going to find when my book finally comes out. It's not out yet, but I hope you enjoy reading it when it does come out. Take care and have a nice day.